The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hello there. Obi-Wan Kenobi here, also known as James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan,
Jedi Master Plo Koon,
and many other characters in the world of Star Wars. You're listening to... Shh, don't tell. It's The Secrets of Star Wars. May the Force be with you.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hi, I'm Andrew Hermiz, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away. From movies to books to TV shows and more, we're looking at the deeper themes and meanings found in Star Wars. So today, we'll be discussing Episode 6 of Andor, entitled The Eye. And here to join me, we've got Robert King. Hey, Robert.
Hi there.
Father Horton.
Andrew.
And Patrick Mason.
Howdy, Andrew.
Hello, hello. Well, we'll hear Episode 6. Is this the halfway point? Is there supposed to be 12?
I think so.
10 or 12?
Yeah, I think
so,
okay.
Yeah.
So we're at the halfway point of Andor, and it seems like, judging from this episode, this is kind of split into 3 episode arcs. I feel like the first 3 were kind of its own little, I guess, movie, you could say. They could stand alone. I mean, they were released on the same day, so you could literally watch it like a movie. In episode 4, 5, and 6, I think it's fair to say, episode 6, wrapped a nice little bow on the story arc that kind of began during episode 4. So, general thoughts, guys. What did you think of episode 6? Just initial feelings and overall impressions of this installment of Andor.
Something actually happened. It was nice.
Yes. Some things indeed did happen.
It also had like the scenes at the beginning and the end really kind of bookended some of the deeper themes going on in the show. I mean, just some outright moral conversations about rebellion and what people are in it for. First with Nemec, and then with what's his name, Steen, at the end. So that was kind of interesting too. This action-packed episode kind of bookended with philosophy.
Yeah, I would like to say that there's a lot of shade thrown at episode 5 because of how slow it was, but that kind of episode is probably my bread and butter. I love, it's one of those I've turned into my father scenarios. He loves watching the old 1930s, 1940s, 50s TV show or movies where it's all just talking and no action. and I realize I've slowly turned into him, but I really enjoy the conversations and the dialogue. This episode was a very tragic episode. There was a lot of death. There was a lot of terrible things happen, both in the group and kind of with Andor. And but it was also a very spectacular episode. The visuals were just stunning. Every time they panned out, basically, or they panned away, you got just this amazing look at Aldhani, or the eye, or the scenes with the ships flying in the eye. Oh my goodness, that was wonderful.
Phenomenal.
I was really struck even by the TIE fighter loadout scenes. Just the chung chung chung. Here we go. Let's go get them.
Yeah.
It didn't work out so well for them, but I mean, it was impressive.
Yeah.
Does it ever work out well for TIE pilots?
No.
Unfortunately, no.
The flying eggshells we all know and love.
Yeah. And it's interesting because that was a beautiful display of kind of the grandioseness of the Empire. Like we always get those displays of like just the ridiculous grandioseness. Like, where do they even get this much stuff? And that whole loadout scene with the TIE fighters, that gigantic space. So very, very tragic, but very beautiful. at the same time. That's kind of my overall impression of the episode.
Yeah, I'll echo a lot of the things you guys said. Father, that's one of the first things I sort of felt like it's like stuff actually happened. The plot is moving along, and yeah, Patrick, I episode 5, I did have an issue with it being kind of slow, but I if you heard the podcast last week, I did have a lot that I liked about it. What the show does really well, even in the quieter moments and the character moments, is it builds up a lot of tension. It really does a good job of creating drama between characters, even if they're just two characters set across from each other in one room. I thought episode 5 had a lot of moments like that. And then obviously in this one, you're getting a lot of those same feelings, but on a grand level, more of an action packed kind of what we're used to seeing from a Star Wars spectacle type of standpoint. And yeah, the episode was visually stunning. Week to week, this show continues to impress me from just a cinematography standpoint.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, it really blows Obi-Wan Kenobi out of the water as far as like just visuals and story, everything has going for it. In my opinion, I think it's everything I wanted Obi-Wan to be. And
they have a little more freedom. Just Obi-Wan has a whole lot of continuity to fit into Andor. As long as you don't trample anything big, you can do what you want.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, with Andor, obviously it's a story that you have more flexibility with because you're dealing with characters that we've either never seen before or just seen one side of, in Rogue One. I think, just to put not to talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi too much, but like, I think that had a lot of problems going into it in pre-production and, had issues during being a COVID type of production, and some writers were hired and then fired and that sort of thing. But, with Andor, I think what we're seeing is a show that is kind of standing apart from the other Star Wars shows, even the ones we love, like Mandalorian. It has its sort of own aesthetic. It has its own sort of maturity level. It's like we've talked about in previous podcasts discussing Andor. This is obviously a more mature, more adult level type of show, where we're seeing characters. We're seeing a lot of these themes, these deeper themes. We're getting into on a very sort of mature and serious level that we're not used to seeing in other Star Wars IP. So I think that's what the show has going for it. And but at the same time, it's still like this episode, I think, is a good example of, is it can still get into that Star Wars spectacle that we love and we're used to. And I think that this episode puts faith in me going forward when we get into the second half of this series. I felt really good about this show up until this point, but like some of us have said, I felt like 4 and 5 had some good moments, but I was like, okay, can we get some plot? Can we get some, like let's get into it. And episode 6, did it for me.
To sort of go along with what Patrick was saying, I think the reason episode 5 felt like it dragged a little bit was because the end of episode 4, episode 4 brought Cassian in, and there was such a sense of urgency. You're bringing this guy in at the last minute, and we don't have time for this. We don't have time for this. We don't have time for this. And then we have a whole episode where they seem to have a lot of time on their hands. Mm-hmm. And so I think episode 5 would not have felt so slow or draggy if the expectations going in hadn't been set up as really urgent. But now we get into episode 6, and we see kind of the fruit of that urgency, and so it feels like it almost picks up where episode 4 was leading.
By the way, we may not get that same 3-story arc thing going forward. I read that the next 3 episodes do not have common directors and writers, so they might be a little more episodic.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that makes me more or less excited, but there it is.
I mean, yeah,
it'll be better than Obi-Wan.
It'll be better than Obi-Wan. I think we can.
Am I the only one here who actually liked Obi-Wan?
I liked Obi-Wan, but I identify as Obi-Wan, so I had to like it.
I liked it, but the problem is, you're expecting to love it, right? It's doing a show with that we've been waiting for so many years, and we were hearing rumors for like a decade whether they were going to do the show or not, and then they finally do it, and then it's kind of like,
yeah.
We obviously had a lot of those great moments, like obviously everything between him and Anakin, even though there were few and far in between. Those were usually done pretty well, and I was very satisfied with. But overall, I think the show had its struggles, getting to the finish line and developing certain characters. But
it was better than Solo.
No, it
wasn't. It sounds like it was the cave on Dagobah, where what's in there is what you take with you.
Yeah. Well, you see,
your expectations, you will not need them.
And I think for me, Andor actually kind of benefits from that, because Obi-Wan was so disappointing to me that it lowered my expectations on anything else coming down the pipeline. And then, so as far as I can tell, this is really good. Now, maybe it's just me like expecting here and getting here and feeling like it's up here, right? Expecting at one level and getting another. But I think Andor does kind of benefit from, I don't know how disappointed I was in Obi-Wan, but yeah, I won't try and go into my diatribes about Obi-Wan.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Let's talk about Andor.
This is an Andor episode.
Right. Well, I mean, what Andor does well, it really is about the characters. And
yeah,
and it's not just about Cassian. I mean, it does a good job of like when they're introducing, when we get introduced to the crew last week, we get to see like a personal side and of every character, and we get to feel, a certain type of way about them, where there are stakes, where we feel it in this episode. There are stakes now. Characters that we just met and characters that didn't make it out in this episode, we actually feel bad for, and that's hard to do in just a 2-episode arc.
Even Behaz and his family were real people. I mean, I felt bad for what the rebels were doing to him.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
And that was one of the beauties of the last episode and this episode is there really aren't any one-dimensional characters. Like it's amazing to me how well they've rounded everybody, including, was it the Commandant? And like even him, I'm like, oh, he's more than just, the bad Imperial guy. Like he's got a family and he's got things he's trying to do, and I'm still a jerk, but
but he wants to get off the dump of a planet to someplace better with his family.
Yeah. And speaking of these characters, were there any, in this episode that stood out to you, any character moments or specific, just characters in general that stood out to you in this episode that you wanted to highlight?
I mean, I thought the Commandant was a standout for exactly the reasons you were pointing out, Father, that just how much depth they gave to his character and how you really sympathized with him and at the same time really loathed him because his dismissiveness of the Donnie people was just so on display. And yeah, he was a really well drawn character. I thought I loved it.
Yeah, his speech at the the second scene where he's talking about the Donnie and how, simple-minded they were, and how the real trick was just to give them multiple options so that they get wrapped up in the fact that they don't even want like that, and especially as like a counterpart to the scene that came right before it, which was about a man struggling with his faith. This struck me as a very like, this is how the devil does things. Like he gives you all of these options that turns out you don't even want any of them, but you're so busy trying to choose. And I was like, whoa, like to me, that struck me as a deep philosophical sort of like, this is the empire and this is how it like destroys peoples.
There's a Chesterton essay whose title I forget, but he talks about how even in the political climate of his day is that they would offer you a choice between two things that the ruling elite's not the way he put it, but they didn't care which one you picked. They just want to put you out there and let you pick, and it doesn't matter because they're both wins for the people in charge. So same thing. All they're doing is they're giving them options that don't really matter to distract them from choices that really do matter.
Yeah. Well, and coming on the heels of, I mean, the other standout character was obviously, at least for me, was Nemec.
Yeah.
You know, and that kind of laying out the philosophy of rebellion in the most coherent way we've ever gotten it from a Star Wars property, I think, at least a movie or TV show. And so you're really drawn to empathize with him and his struggle to sleep and you know, that question of faith that he has. And then you go to someone who is a true believer in the Empire. You know, he does not have a struggle of faith, the Commandant. And the contrast between them, I thought, really worked well as well.
Yeah, I loved his conversation with Andor. And this struck me very much as like, it's a man who's struggling with his faith, who's trying to approach a man who he thinks is an atheist, you know, to his cause. Yes. And because you can see the sort of anger on his face when he's talking about these things and the direction that the conversation takes. And then Andor just gets in his face and he's like, do I look like I'm thankful? And it sort of dawns on Nemec that no, he's not an atheist. He's at least agnostic. Like he's
yeah.
And just I love that conversation because it was such a good interplay between a guy who's all in on something, trying to deal with an older guy who's sort of not, but also has his own, you know, gears turning in his brain and how things operate, and trying to come to grips with, well, why isn't my motivation stealing me for what we're about to go into? Like, you've got nothing and you're not freaking out the way I am. And Andor's like, dude, it's just because I've done this before. Like, like it's experience. It's not faith. And then Nemec's kind of struggle with that. Those two scenes, I love those two scenes. But that's because I love the talking. So
yeah, the talking is good on the show. I mean, the writing is great so far. I think it's really strong, and to keep the topic on Nemec, you know, I thought, yeah, he's definitely a standout, and you know, unfortunately, he does not make it out of this episode alive. Spoiler alert.
Very few people do.
Very few people do.
Yeah, almost nobody.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, that's just, we're seeing the Empire at the height of its power. And you're seeing what happens when you try to challenge that. And unfortunately for most people that have done it, the end result is not a good one. And I think that's a sort of sobering reminder. You know, it's like, hey, like, you know, this is set, like 5 years before Rogue One. And even during Rogue One, it was, you know, a death mission, right? I mean, we know Cassian's fate. So Nemec is just another example of that. And I think what really was, I think, a point that drove home for me is that it doesn't matter how right you are. You know, I mean, obviously, and it doesn't matter how deeply you believe in your beliefs. You know, obviously there's an objective belief that he carries where he's just against the whole totalitarianism of the Empire and is working for freedom and just wanting to stop the injustices. It doesn't matter how right or how deeply you believe in it. If the other side is that much more powerful, it doesn't bode well for you. And when you try to step up to it, a power like that, you have to be willing to deal with the repercussions. And I think that's obviously the whole, I guess, slogan or motto for the rebellion, is that especially if you're the little guy, if you're not, this show is about all these little guys, and it's about the people that are in this fight that are not master Jedi warriors. They're not, they're not powerful beings, or they don't have a lot of material wealth. They're not supported by a strong army or any sort of government. They're just trying to figure it out as they go along. And these are the sort of casualties that come along with that. And I thought that was a big theme in this episode. And obviously that's probably going to be an ongoing theme throughout the series. So just, what do you guys, think about that? This whole theme of loss during war. And, the whole idea of the Empire against, the rebellion, who, even though a lot of these people a lot of these characters are flawed, what they believe in is a just cause.
I mean, it's interesting how Vel, who's sort of the leader of this little cell, she seems very willing to leave people behind. First she leaves what's his name, Tamarin, without a second thought. And the accusation when they're flying away is that she is, she doesn't care about Nemik either. She doesn't want to give him a chance. She's afraid it'll jeopardize the mission. And that's contrasted with Skeen and Cashin. Like, Skeen really seems to care about Nemik's fate. He's the one who argues we got to take him to the doctor. And I think it was Nemik who was saying, where's Tamarin? So like, it's interesting that like the leadership seems to require a certain coldness. And again, contrasted with one of the scenes that made the Commandant stand out for me as a character, when he's marched into the vault, he briefs the guards. He says, this is not a inspection. This is a robbery. These people have killed. I expect they will again. That's why I urge you to cooperate. And it showed that his leadership involved a certain amount of caring for those under him. And that was a weird kind of reversal. You've got an imperial leader who cares, even though he's a horrible person in lots of other respects. And you've got Vel, who maybe doesn't care, or who at least is steeling herself as to the losses that she knows she's going to take. And that, yeah, I know that was an interesting contrast to my mind.
I did wonder why Vel was so hesitant to take the final steps, that Cinta kept having to say, do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, that is like, because when you're going into an operation like that, you're pretty sure half, maybe, of your guys are going to not make it. Because no plan works, right? It always goes sideways somewhere, somehow. And I think that's like her just sitting there, on top of that, dam, looking down on the other side, is like, it's coming home to her that like they're about to do this thing, and her and/or three or four other people that she's trained with or lived with in the wild for months or years or however long are not going to come back from this, and it's her call. And then you see her on the other side of that decision, like, I made it, now we're going. So yeah, I think that's what that scene relates to me.
Yeah, I mean, she's obviously, again, she's seen, like, she knows the price that some people have to pay when you're a part of this rebellion, and she doesn't have time, to worry about, unfortunately, if someone just dies on a mission, and things go off the rails pretty quickly. I mean, she just in this episode had to deal with, Lieutenant Gorn, being a traitor, and that whole thing where him and Terramin are killed, and how they narrowly escape, and with Cassian, that was a great scene. I mean, you can see the type of missions that they go on. There's no time for sympathy, unfortunately, and you kind of just have to have the bigger picture in mind and just try to get out of there with, whether it's the goal you had set in motion, or just trying to get out of there with your own life, if it's a failed mission. So I think, the show this episode does a good job of showing the reality of just the situation that they're in.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to do like a deep dive into just war theory or anything, but that distinction between jus ad bellum and jus in bello, the justice in going to war versus the justice in how you conduct yourself during the war, that's kind of floating to the surface here, right?
Absolutely,
because like you said, you've got a very righteous cause that Nemik lays out pretty clearly at the beginning of the episode, and versus a very despicable, insidious cause that the Empire stands for, that tyranny. And yet the tactics that they both use are questionable at best. There's honor on both sides, and there's dishonor on both sides, and the good causes really have trouble staying true to themselves when it comes down to the actual combat.
One of the questions I took from the episode was, it's the jus in bello part of it. Is there actually a moral difference between would the rebels be doing what the Imperials are doing if their situations were reversed? If they had the power to treat the Imperials the way the Imperials treat them, what would happen? And I think sometimes, like in the brutal treatment of the Commandant's family says we can't be sure that they wouldn't.
Although there was that conversation that Vel had with the Commandant. He said, you're just going to kill us all anyway. And she said, no, that's what you would do. If we get what we want, we all walk out of here alive. And they got most of what they want, and most people didn't walk out of there alive.
But I find it interesting they end up killing the Commandant because they work him to death.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, like it's not, no, they didn't shoot him. Like it wasn't execution style, but you worked him to death. That that strikes me as odd. That's
awesome. But they weren't intending to work happen.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I think the show, another thing it does really well that you don't usually see in Star Wars, like usually in Star Wars is like you have the Empire and you have the Rebels. Very clear distinction on who the bad guys are, who the good guys are. Mm-hmm. This show just shows a lot of morally gray people on both sides, and you have this degree of sympathy, for the bad guy, for those, those on that work for the Empire, and we see this with, we see his son is sick, and his wife just wants to get away, and the commander, he's just doing what he's told, and he's trying to, he's moving up the, quote unquote corporate ladder, the Empire's ladder, just to, try to have a better life for his family. And yeah, you see the the reality of it is this: he's just worked to death. He's literally worked to death because of it, and you feel bad for him. It's not like he's this very black. It's very black and white. Like he's just a bad guy. Like I felt bad for him, and I think the show does a really good job of any character that they introduce us to. It doesn't matter what side they're on. We're getting to know them on such a personal level and seeing what their motivations and intentions are, that we can empathize with them.
Visual contrast too, versus the big guys at the top. And every time we're actually on Coruscant, everything Imperial is spick and span and polished to a T, and the base is a grungy mess. I mean, you can see it's painted black, but the black is chipped off here and there. Again, the underside, I guess, of the Empire, that everything at the top levels may be nice and spick and span, but they can't afford to keep a nice base going, or can't be bothered.
It's definitely sort of an outskirts. It's a frontier base in a lot of ways. Well, that's another thing that this show just generally is doing well, and this episode is a great example of that, because we do get scenes in Coruscant at the end, and we've got the scenes in the base, and we get the culture of the Donnie people themselves. But especially in the first 3 episodes, we got, this is what life looks like on the ground in an Imperial run, mid-rim system. And it's like, this is the first show that I think has really brought home to me what is so harmful about the Empire. It's always been sort of the mythical Dark Lord and evil, big evil in previous movies and such, but this is bringing it home at a very practical level. It's not just evil, it's bad. It's bad for the people who have to live under this kind of oppression that is not just political, but it also seems to be economic oppression and just social oppression, and it's just not a good way to live. And so seeing the world really developed so fully and richly is expanding the possibilities of the Star Wars universe for storytelling.
Great. One other thing I wanted to bring up is, I think obviously at the end of the episode, if we could just go there for a minute, we have this encounter between Skeen and Cassian, where Cassian is presented with this. It's like, hey man, 80 million credits. We could just split it and just get out of here. Let's just forget everything. And Cassian does what Cassian has done in these situations. Just pulls out a gun and kills the guy.
Are there any problems that can't be solved with a blaster?
Yeah. I mean, you maybe you got to respect it. I mean, he
ancient religions and hokey weapons, or ancient weapons and hokey religions.
Yeah. No match for a good blaster at your side, kid.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's funny, but it's interesting at the same time. It's like, that sort of a similar situation to that is what has gotten him into this sort of situation he's in anyway, at the beginning of the season. But we see this response that Cassian has, and I think the temptation is there. I mean, Cassian, obviously, what his sort of guise, I think, throughout this sort of 3-episode arc is that he's just a mercenary. I'm paid to be here. Like, I know you guys are, a lot of you guys are in it for the cause and all that, but like, I'm just a hired gun. We talked about it a little bit with episode 5, where we see a Cassian that's not fully developed in his beliefs. We're not we're not close to the guy that he is in Rogue One, where he is so firm and what he believes in, and he literally is willing to die for it. He's not there at all, but we see where he is now. He's surrounded by these people. I mean, I think Nemec has had a profound impact on him, because he got to spend time with someone who's so firm in his beliefs, and was able to articulate why he is so passionate about being a part of this rebellion, and why the Empire is such a force that needs to be stopped, at any cost. But we see here, like maybe there was a temptation for Cassian to take the money and run. But in a panic, he just decides like, hey, even if this guy is not trying to pull a fast one on me, I can't take that chance. Either way, I can't trust this guy anymore going forward. Like, even if I take the money, what if he just shoots me as soon as I turn around? Or even if I say no to it, maybe he'll shoot me, or I can't trust the guy anymore. So the easiest answer is just boom, taken care of. That's what I thought. I mean, what did you guys think about it?
And once he admits having lied to Cassian in the first place and everybody else about who he is and about his story, Cassian has trust issues to begin with, and that kind of wipes him out. I mean, yeah, there's no relationship left there.
Yeah, Cassian is really scrupulously honest about being dishonest.
Wow, that's accurate.
He's like, I'm a mercenary. You really have no reason to trust me except that I'm your best option here, and here we are. I'm not going to sell you on some sentimental story so that you can develop your feelings of trust for me. You just need to trust me or not. Period. And there's kind of a refreshingness about that. And he just will not take a betrayal of that kind of, if you're going to be dishonest, be honest about it. Principle. He won't stand for it.
I think it goes back even to when he says, no, we're going to take what's his name to the doctor, when Vel's saying, no, we need to bail on the whole mission. I mean, by this point, Cassian is actually committed to something beyond himself and helping someone who's had an impact on his life. And so it's going to be much harder for him to say, yeah, for 40 million, maybe I'll turn my back on these people. He's made a commitment to them, whether he knows it or not.
Yeah, I really love this conversation between the two of them. And I love how, Andor makes these throwaway statements constantly, and they always spin into something bigger. He makes a throwaway, yeah, maybe he'll get lucky. And Skeen is like, luck. That's the thing that runs the whole galaxy, right? And you get like a very clear picture right then and there of what Skeen's whole viewpoint. And he does lay it out further as he goes on, I didn't have a brother, I was born in a hole just like you, and I know the only way out is to crawl on someone else's back. And Andor, I think he can both see some of himself in what Skeen is saying, and then despising that. And then like, I think part of it, he shoots him because he can't trust him, but I think part of it is he shoots him because he can't trust himself. It's like, if I kill this guy, then there's no more. I'm gonna run away with him to a base, 8 parsecs away on a moon and steal this stuff. I'm gonna kill this guy. I'm gonna buy this guy's speeder, and I'm gonna get the heck out because I don't want to be in this situation anymore.
I did the job. I'm done.
That's right. I'm out. Yeah. I just, the whole, like in the build up to Cassian pulling the gun and shooting him. And that moment, I think the timing of that moment, it's almost like mid-sentence with Skeen, and it's just like, okay, you got to the point. I'm pulling my gun and I'm shooting you. Like there was this, you're getting there, trigger, boom.
Cassian shot first.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is like too meta, But I am really seeing the character of Cassian Andor as like this extended meditation on the character of Han Solo.
Yes. Yes.
Cassian is the guy who shoots first. This conversation about luck is what makes the galaxy run. And it's like, well, in my experience, there's no such thing as luck. So there are so many sort of Han Solo callbacks in both in Rogue One and in this series.
If money is what you crave, then money is what you will receive.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
Well, and he walks into, Vel, the princess, right? And he's like, I'm getting paid to do my job and I'm out. I'm not in this for your rebellion. It's the same basic scene, just in much different circumstances.
Well, and developed it just so much more depth, right? And okay, somebody referenced the movie Solo earlier.
That was my fault. Sorry.
Well,
it's a beautiful movie.
No, I wonder if I wonder if Solo wouldn't have been a better movie if it had not been about, if it hadn't been so much about Han Solo fan service and had been more of like this sort of meditation on what is it like to be a mercenary and a smuggler in the context of the Empire and the Rebellion.
I think maybe the franchise had to crash and burn with Solo before Disney had enough guts to try it. So
maybe.
Well, I think.
Well, the Rogue One came out before Solo, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It was the one before. I think. I mean, ultimately, I think Andor is the end point of a journey that was begun by Disney when they bought the property, and George Lucas walked away with his $4 billion duffel bag, and said, his passing comment, "Oh yeah, it's for kids. Just remember that." And then they were like, "Well, we're chucking that in the bin, but slowly, we're going to slowly expand this." What I've seen with the Clone Wars show and the Rebel show, and eventually the Rogue One movie, and Solo, and then The Mandalorian, and each of them has gotten just a little where you have dark and light, very obvious in all the Star Wars movies, and they've all slowly gotten grayer and grayer and grayer, and now we find ourselves in Andor, and we're in the thick of the gray, and it's very much not a kid's show because of that, because we're dealing with complex relationships and complex war situations. I absolutely hated Rogue One the first time I saw it because I wanted a Star Wars movie. I wanted a black and white, bad guys, good guys Star Wars movie. And I had somebody, I was in an argument with a friend of mine about it, and he was like, "Pat, it's a war movie set in the Star Wars universe." I was like, "Right, fine, I'll watch it again." And halfway through the movie, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing!" This is a war movie set in the Star Wars universe.
It's a story of redemption, and which is what I said at the time. And we see all the more now when they're threatening in Rogue One, saying, "Fine, we give up. The rebellion is over." And all the people said, "No, we've already done so much in the name of the rebellion. We cannot quit. We have to make all those things we did good." Not good. We have to make good on everything that we already had to do. We can't drop it now, and we're seeing what that was.
Yeah, I think with this show, you guys are making a good point. I think what it's revealing is the true nature of the rebellion itself. I think what it also shows that rebels are just good at being rebels. They're not necessarily good at being, peacekeepers or, establishing governments. If you think about the original trilogy, yay, the rebels won. Okay, then a few decades later, the First Order is here now. They're not good at this sort of thing. And we see also in these other we saw a lot of this in the sequel trilogy, for better or worse, and we see it in Mandalorian a little bit as well. Here and there, the whole idea, being of Jedis and what they do and the part that they've played, they're not necessarily saints, and they're it's not perfect, the way that they go about things, and it's not perfect that the way the rebellion goes about, doing what they do. What we know is that in this episode we have like the Aldani people. We see the Empire in its true nature. That they're a big part of why they can spread their power is that they colonize. So they've colonized these people. They've ripped them from their, they're doing what, there's like about 50, 60 left, and they're so like happy about it that they've established like this footprint, on this cultural land, and they're about to wipe out, these people, wipe them from existence. I mean, that's the nature of the Empire. And I think Cassian, I think this is his first realization, or an early realization for him, is that, the rebellion's job is like, yeah, we're trying to take down the Empire, and these things, these horrible injustices and this colonizing needs to stop. But the rebels are not necessarily the ones that are gonna, like, what are they gonna do? Are they gonna come in and establish it? Are they gonna be like the point you made earlier? What if the tables were turned? What if the rebels had the power? It's like, they're not. What are you gonna teach these people? They're very set in their ways. All they want is peace. All they want is to be able to live, and that's the ultimate fight. So that's why Star Wars, you can always go back and forth in cycles. It's like rebels win, new empire rises. Okay, empire falls, rebels win, new empire rises. It's very cyclical, and I guess you could say that happens in just human history as well. I mean, the old saying, history tends to repeat itself. I think the show establishes a good sort of explanation of that. It's like, hey, we're there's levels to this. Like the Star Wars that you saw, like as far as the cinematic theatrical releases, where it's very black and white, there's a lot behind that we can get into that, is not necessarily like that for the little guy. So I don't know, what are your guys' thoughts on that, this overall sort of theme of like how the rebellion, how they tend to work, and is, how, if they do succeed, like what's the path forward?
Well, it definitely raises the question of is a galactic, whether it's a republic or an empire, is a galactic level government sustainable at all? And you can kind of translate that down to globalism and global terms in the real world as well. But the galactic empire is such a sci-fi trope, and it is Star Wars maybe questioning that trope?
Yeah, I really liked the exchange between Gorn and the leader of the Aldani, or the the
Donnie people.
Yeah, the Donnie people. It's about the eye finding the good in all of us, and then that juxtapositioned against what he says to the Commandant, which is like, our ghosts have strong hands and long memories, or something to that nature, which is very much a threat. Like, I know you're wiping us out, but we're going to get back at you, kind of a thing.
I think it was the other, like when the chief first greeted Gorn, he greeted, may the eye find what is good in you. But then the chief was saying to the Commandant, our ghosts are strong and long lived, or something. And the lieutenant switched it up to,
right, And you can tell the Donnie,
keep the insult from reaching the commandant.
Yeah, he knew, like, instantly. He like looked at him like, hey, that's not what I said. And the Donnie chief taking the fur he gets and just like chucking it on the fire. I think it speaks a lot to kind of the tragic nature of what's, because what you get from that point on is sort of this interplay between, I think the director did an amazing job. You get shots of what's going on in the operation, and then you get shots of the Donnie people kind of building up to their thing. And it's a great action building / you don't have to see the boring part of the operation while they're doing stuff. And we cut back and everybody's already tied up and everything, you know, and it's a back and forth as we build towards this amazing, spectacular event. And at the same time, we know that these 60 Donnie who are in this valley at their temple, they're it. Right, they're the last people who are going to get to see this in their sacred valley at their temple this time next year. This is all going to be torn down and part of a project, and they'll not be allowed there anymore. And you get this feeling this is kind of like it's a blow to the Empire, right? Like this stealing of all this money, and they're making their escape, and there's a lot of like, you know, good feelings behind that, and they do this thing, but at the end of the day, you know, the timetable's still on. Right, like you see, and I think that plays out very well with like the tears rolling down the face of the Aldani who were watching the eye, and they're, even though the rebellion struck a huge blow, the Empire still got its timetable. They're still gonna destroy this valley, build their air base. Like it's all like, so there's, and I think that goes back to the original conversation between Andor and Nemec about, you know, is it hopeless? Like, do you really think this is all hopeless? Should we just take what we get? And Andor's like, no, I don't think that. But at the same time, like, how hard can you punch these guys and really make a difference? And I think that is a build into Andor's character that they're trying to thrust at us, because I've noticed in the previews or the preview to each episode, they show Luthen saying the same line over and over and over again, which is, wouldn't you spend your life for something bigger? Right? And they're trying to push this notion into Andor that like these little jobs are not going to do it. Like, we're not going to get there. Like, the Empire is just too big.
That's, I think, also why he gets Nemec's manifesto at the end, is he has to be convinced that to look for something bigger, that there's something more to live for and something more to risk for than just whatever credits you can make and living to fight another day.
Yeah, great points. I mean, I think, you know, at the very end of the episode, where we see Deidre again, and we see them, you know, sort of prepare to counter this rebel, I guess, victory, and then you see we kind of contrast that with Luthen celebrating in the back room of his shop, and you see Mon Mothma, you know, before the Senate, and you know the Senate is disinterested. I think this indicates like the sort of direction Andor is gonna head to in the second half, and obviously along with, you know, Cassian getting to kind of negotiate his way out, you know, of the crew, and with Nemec's manifesto, is that like, hey, you're gonna have, you know, there are these sort of tiny victories, and you're gonna have, like, for Cassian, you think like, okay, you've done something, and you just need to get out and figure out your next move. But you know, that theme that Luthen, you know, brings up, like you said, like it's sort of a common phrase that's put into these previews throughout the series, is that it's like, hey, there's something bigger. There's a bigger mission out here, and don't you want to be a part of it? And I think it's building up to that. And however many more of these little one-off missions Cassian needs to be a part of before he realizes that and becomes the Cassian that that we know is a part of the big plan in Rogue One. Well, I guess that's yet to be seen. But I think you guys made a good point. Is like that's ultimately where this is all headed, and is this a matter of when Cassian is going to be fully on board?
Yeah. I loved the ending with Luthen, because it's a direct opposite of the ending from the last episode, right? So you get the Luthen scared, afraid, being comforted by his assistant, and it ends with him just like this sigh, this like nervous sigh, and
relief.
Right.
Yeah.
In this one, he's like in the back and he's like laughing and has got his arms up, and then he just breathes out like it's a sigh of it's the two different sighs. It's the sighs of like terrified nervousness and the sigh of triumph and exaltation. And it's also, I think, I love those two scenes just for Luthen, because I think those two scenes more than any other scene give you a dive into who Luthen really is. Because he's in every other scene he's interacting with Mon Mothma or with Andor or with Vel, and he's trying to sell something or sell a point or get something done for the rebellion. And at this point he doesn't have, like, he's out, like he doesn't have any part of it anymore. And so this is Luthen and his like real reactions. And it's like, oh, he's a real person. He's not just this, smoking man in the background. He's trying to pull things, spider web, trying to pull everything together. He's a real, flesh and blood kind of a guy who has emotions. I liked that scene. I also think it's interesting because I don't know whether or not Mon Mothma knew about the mission or what was going to happen. And it obviously, like, what they show us is it's a direct derailment of what she's talking about in the Senate at that time. And it's possible a direct derailment of the legislation she's just proposed. Because she's talking about, and what I get the feel is it's some sort of like thing the Empire has imposed on the Gorman peoples and, for security reasons. And she's saying, no, you don't need these draconian security measures. And then, we just had this giant, our payroll was stolen from us in this huge operation. Obviously we do need security. So I actually see some potential building friction between her and Luthen coming up. Could be terribly wrong on that one, but I think it's a good setup for that.
No, I think you're right. I think I definitely get, from Rogue One as well, and actually from the animated show Rebels, which is also about like how the rebellion developed into what we saw it as in A New Hope. You've got all of these different groups with their different agendas, and they are coming into conflict with each other. And Mon Mothma is definitely one who is trying to pull them all together into a single coherent movement. And Luthen maybe is doing that as well, but I don't know what Luthen's ultimate motives are. And this is Star Wars. I am not above having Palpatine-like suspicions of him. Is he playing both sides?
Yep.
So, there's a lot of tension, but as you said, Andrew, we're halfway through the series. This is the point where we should, where we're probably going to start seeing Andor really figuring out where he's going to take his stand. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Totally. Again, just to bring that point home, I think the show is also it really is focusing on like even though there are, we talked a lot about there's good guys on, quote unquote, good guys on both sides, or at least characters that are not so black and white. But you're also seeing like what kind of person aligns themselves with the Empire. It's, even though they might have they're like normal people with normal problems, they're still fueled by, the desire to facilitate like their own plans, and ultimately it's fueled by their greed, and it's their self-satisfaction, and that's contrasted with the type of person that would join the rebellion. That's usually someone like, I guess on a best case, it's someone like Nemec, who's like this sort of young revolutionary type character who's trying to lead the charge, and even though he doesn't offer much, as far as like being a soldier, writing this manifesto, I'm sure this manifesto is gonna serve the story, and it's gonna come back up in this series once again. I mean, obviously we see Cassian lead with it. I mean, we know, a lot of historical events, we rely on them because someone wrote about them. We can't just trust one perspective. We have to be able to see different sources, and obviously wanting it to come from the perspective of someone who was on the right side of history, and how they led the charge. That's the type of person that sparks a rebellion that ends up being victorious in its efforts, and that's the difference. And I think that's, Cassian could have easily been a mercenary for the Empire, and done stuff for the money until ultimately he would break bad. But he obviously, we know he becomes a hero with the rebellion in the end. So I think the show is, while it does a good job of showing the morally gray on both sides, there is that still that distinct contrast between the two. I think that's about our time, but before we wrap up, were there any final thoughts on the episode that you wanted to bring up before we wrap up here?
Just checking my notes.
That's always good. It's good practice.
Actually,
I don't want to miss a thing.
Think through the episode again.
We had maybe the first time we had a real deliberately humorous moment when the commandant's saying, this must have shrunk in transit.
Oh, yeah.
His
maybe
wife
you've
gets
expanded.
She gets 2 digs on him. You expanded, and then later on when he's like, I expect everyone to be on their best behavior, and she's like, well, that would be nice to see.
Yeah. I mean, it's a glimpse into their family dynamic there. It's like, oh boy, this is not the healthiest family.
No. It's funny. I think we covered everything but the action.
Oh my gosh. The eye, man. The eye.
Blasters, dude. Pew, pew, pew.
Man. Yeah. We had some Star Wars. Like, it was epic.
Yeah. I mean, what can you say about wow? I mean, just amazingly executed action. It was fantastic.
That's going to be hard to top. I mean, from just a visual standpoint. I mean, this is probably, it's definitely one of the best, if not the best, visually stunning episode of Star Wars television that we've gotten. I mean, the streaming medium has gone so far. I mean, we're just watching a movie every week now, basically. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to think back of all the great scenes we've gotten in Mandalorian, and this one really stood out. It was really cinematic in its scope, and its action, and choreography and all that, and it was amazing. It was amazing. It'd be, again, every week I'm surprised by the show, and I don't know how they're going to top the eye, but I'd love to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, that's really my big question. I'm like, because Andor's kind of noping out. How is he going to get pulled back in? Because it's like Vel and I can't remember her name, but those are the only 2 survivors, and one of them's back on
Cinta.
Yeah, Cinta. She's back on Aldhani. So I don't figure they're going to go after Cassian. So is Luthien going to try and bring him back in? How does he get back in?
I think Luthien, because Luthien recruited him in the first place, not just for that one expedition. He's got more in mind for him.
Oh, for
That's
sure.
my guess as well. Yeah.
So I
think that's part of the his joy and laughter at the end too, is that it's like, oh, this worked out, because last week he was like, oh man, I think I made a mistake bringing Cassian into this, right?
Mm-hmm.
but now he's sort of like justified in his decision making, and like you said, Father, he has other plans for him, so I'm sure he'll be a big part of reining him back in.
Yeah, Luthien, when he was recruiting him, he talked several times about how he didn't come for the Imperial device that Andor had stolen. He came for Andor, so he sees something in Andor that he's after, and I'm still kind of wondering, what is it that he's looking for in Andor? What is it that he saw that he's going for? And of course, the other question I have going forward is the one that was raised right at the beginning of the whole series. Is he really looking for his sister? What's going on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I really want to see that play out, and I have no idea if they're going to give it to us or not.
If they don't, I mean, that's such a huge dangling loose end. Either they're setting themselves up for another series, or they just goofed horribly.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt it's the latter. But yeah, they're going to revisit it at some point. And yeah, I mean, I think I can see it going both ways, whether it's something that we start seeing, immediately next week, or if it's something that maybe they'll tease at the end and set it up for season 2. Who knows? But
it was a big reveal.
There's still the
episode
question
12.
about the sister. Yeah. What was that, Father?
Give us a big reveal in episode 12. Bring us back for next season.
Always got to end on a cliffhanger. These Star Wars shows are usually good at that.
His sister becomes a Sith Lord or something.
I like it.
Oh, dude, I'm on board. I'm on board.
It's one of the hands, or Palpatine or something.
Yeah.
His sister is Jar Jar. No, we're not going there.
Ooh.
Oh, hey.
That's rough, man.
His sister is Mara Jade.
I like it.
Okay.
And we haven't seen her brought back in yet, have we?
I don't know how you can do. Well, I guess she couldn't be married to Luke because that wouldn't work, but she could still be in as herself. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to wait to find out. Yeah. That is very intriguing. Well, with that, we just want to thank you all for listening, and just want to remind you guys that you can visit sqpn.com/give if you want to be one of our very generous patrons to help support the channel, and be sure to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts, we're probably there. So just look out for us by searching SQPN or Secrets of Star Wars, or check us out on our SQPN YouTube channel. And if you want to find previous episodes of Secrets of Star Wars, or send feedback, please visit sqpn.com/Star Wars. You can email us at starwars@sqpn.com, or follow StarQuest on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or on Twitter at SQPN. You can also join our Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord.
This StarQuest show is brought to you by Tim Shevlin's Personal Fitness Training for Catholics, providing spiritual and physical wellness through personalized nutrition, workout and prayer programs, and daily accountability check-ins. Learn more by visiting fitcatholics.com.
We'll be back next week with episode 7 of Andor. Until then, Robert King, thank you for joining me on The Secrets of Star Wars.
Great conversation. Thanks.
Yeah, very wonderful conversation. Father Horn, thank you as well.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Patrick Mason, it was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for putting up with me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was quite difficult. No, this was awesome. Hey, once again, I'm Andrew, and thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Here's There's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy, The Secrets of Technology. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/technology.